Hello, everyone, and welcome to this interview. We've got two interviews coming up today and tomorrow, which we've all been looking forward to. Today, we're going to interview the Leader of the Opposition on Enfield Council, Joanne Laban, who you'll see in a minute, and tomorrow, Nezo Kaliskan, who's the Leader of Enfield Council. And it's quite amazing. We've got two women as leaders, which has never happened before in Enfield, and that's progress. And that's interesting in itself. And it's great that we've got both of them. It's great that both of them have agreed to take part. So welcome, Joanne, and thank you for doing this with us today. And I think to begin with, I think some people would like to know something about you and yourself. Tell us a bit about your background and what brought you into politics.
I've lived in Enfield all my life, and I come from a family who did a lot of, my mum was a school governor, my dad was on committees outside of the council, but we was involved in swimming. I was a competitive swimmer, and sports committees are, fun enough, quite like sitting on a committee at Enfield Council sometimes, and it was because my parents had a strong community and work ethic that you should play a part, and it sort of naturally progressed that I took up the baton, but just took it on a political route rather than the community route my parents did. So I think it's families involved in giving back. It's passed to the next generation with me.
Yeah, sports committees sound a lot more lethal than council committees, but I mean, I've heard you described as a working class Tory. Is that a fair description?
It is. I grew up on the eastern side of the borough, and I went to local schools, and I now live close to my ward, and I think that shocks people. Sometimes I think if you're a Conservative, you've always lived on the western side of the borough, and that's not true. And I came from there, and I come from a background. My brother and I are the first generation to go to university. So yes, you can say that I'm a working class Tory who has to work for a living like everybody else.
And Rupert Price wanted me to ask you, what is it you like about the borough you live in? What would you sort of identify as those things that are really good for you?
The people, when we knock on doors, people are friendly, even if they may not be supporters. And also, I would say the fact that we've got town and country rolled into one. We have the benefit of lots of shops, and we're sort of, depending on where you are, 45 minutes or half an hour into central London. You go to Forty Hall, White Webbs, and you've got countryside. And I think it makes it a very special place to live.
Yeah, country and town rolled into one. That sounds like a Tory dream. So you got interested in politics, you got involved in politics. What made you want to go on the council and then become leader of your group?
I went to stand for council because if you want to make a contribution and full change in an area of the borough about its future, you have to be elected. And so that's what led me to be a councillor, and I stood, and I was lucky. The first time I stood, I didn't win. I tried again, and I did, which teaches about you winning and losing in life. It doesn't always happen all at once. And to be leader, I'd done a lot of, I was deputy leader of my group, I was a shadow cabinet member, and so I stood, and I won, like what happens in political parties, and I lead the group. I try to make it as modern as well. Sometimes the Conservatives could be seen as old-fashioned, but there are younger Tories, and we are ready to stand and serve the community.
So would you say you're on the progressive and compassionate side of conservatism?
I would say we're a broad church, and I am on the compassionate side of conservatism. But I have strong views on law and order, and just how you'd have it on other sides. On some policies you're very on one side of the party, and other policies you're on another, but I do try to be sort of your centre and progressive. Okay,
so you're now leader of your group, you're leader of the opposition, and as one American president once says, the buck stops here, and you have to take responsibility. And you've had a rough week, really, or a rough couple of weeks, and you're still laughing at it. I mean, you've had one councillor who's resigning for family reasons. You've had to withdraw the whip from another councillor because of alleged racist remarks, and you also had trouble with another councillor. Now, to what extent, I mean, how do you think you could handle that? I mean, do you think you handled that the right way? Do you think that these were one-offs, or is there an endemic problem of racism at all in your party?
Not at all. We've had individual incidents, and they were dealt with swiftly and in the right way. We've had a suspension. We've had 2 suspensions of the group whip and the membership of people who could and should have used more moderate and sensitive language and did not display what you should do. And that's why we acted swiftly in the way that we've done. I do take this very seriously. We are a diverse borough, and we are Enfield Conservatives and councillors, regardless of party, are here for all the community, regardless of background, culture, religion. We serve you all. And I wanted to send a message, and so did other councillors, that we are for everybody. And that's why we were elected, to make Enfield a better place, and that's for all Enfield residents. It's not systematic, not at all. I've done my best to engage in the different communities in Enfield. As leader, I've made that a point, and if you go on my Facebook, I've been around, and I think that's imperative as a councillor in a diverse borough.
So there are no more problems lurking there in the background that you want to tell us about?
No, and after the current week, I do not wish to have any more either. But if people are, if there are instances of that, it is right that we acted swiftly, and that is the correct state of affairs for any political party. And the one last week was within 24 hours of the meeting, and I'm very proud that I took that action along with my local party, because it was the right and correct thing to do.
Yeah, well, lots of people think that you did very well there, including a lot of Labour people. I know that because they've said that to me. But it raises a question, doesn't it? It raises a question about the candidates we select and selection. And I mean, you're not the only one who's had problems. The Labour Party has also had problems. And we know that the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party is looking at the way in which council candidates were selected from the Labour Party. Because there was some allegation that rules were broken. So the whole question of selection has become a big issue. And when you're in a safe seat, selection tantamounts to election. And when you've got only 2% of the people belong to political parties, and not many turn up at meetings, and so they're easy to pack them and get people in and crowd them in to vote for one person or another. So do you think we need to reform the selection process, make it more open, make it more transparent, and somehow involve more people in the selection, not just the election, but the selection process?
I think that there are strict rules that the parties follow, and it's right that the members are involved in that. Every time there is an election, they are re-looked at, so they can be better. In some instances, in other areas, we've had open primaries, and that's not necessarily, that's either been very successful or unsuccessful in a way, because you could pick a candidate who may not be as involved in the party and therefore not necessarily know everything, what's going to happen, especially if you get selected many years before the actual election. I believe that more participation is always good. I think that is to do with our times more than anything. Years ago, you would be a member of a party, whereas lots of people take a political route in being involved in pressure groups rather than membership of political parties. And that may be where things have changed. But the membership of a party is, if you're a member of it, you should be part of the decision-making process on candidates. You know, both Labour and Conservative had problems with local candidates, but we've also had some very good new people that I want to make sure that they progress on the council. So it hasn't all been bad. So no, I think that we have quite good rules and people follow them, but I'm glad that parties have to relook every time there is a selection process done, so they can be better for next time.
So everything in the garden's rosy. You wouldn't change the selection process. You wouldn't make any recommendations at all.
Recommendations. I think that it's been too busy to reflect. I'd like more people involved. That's always a good thing, and that would be better. So I agree with you that more people involved makes it a better process.
Yeah, well, the question for all parties, of course, is how do you do that? And it's not a problem that you face alone. Okay, so, you know, you've got your candidates, you've got your Conservative opposition, and you've seen the Labour Party come up with a number of priorities, a number of proposals. And certainly Nezu Kalaskan hit the ground running by doing that when she was elected and saying she had a number of priorities. What are your priorities? If you had to list them for the next 4 years, what are the issues that are most important for you?
I think housing is one, keeping Enfield a nice place to live. Another one, high streets. It's community safety is another. We want to make sure we have good customer service from Enfield Council. Over the years, lots of people found it very difficult to get in touch with the council for certain issues, and we are here to help. And I think customer service was something you probably wouldn't always have heard over the years, but it is an important factor with Enfield Council. So I would list housing regeneration, obviously social care, community safety, and keeping it clean, green and tidy. Because if it's clean, green and tidy, it makes everybody a better place to live.
Okay, so those are the things you'd like to see changed. Those are the things you would like to see improved. But the difference between you and Labour, in a way, and not just here in Enfield, but right across the UK, is that, you know, Labour is saying all the problems we have is because of the cuts, because of austerity, because of the national government. And Conservatives are saying the problems are you're not managing yourself, you're not delivering yourself efficiently. What side of that debate are you on? Though that's very obvious the answer, I guess.
You'd be surprised. I do believe that local government has done its bit over the years, and probably more so than some other departments in austerity. I think it should be proud of itself. Any area wants more money. That's a natural thing, and I think you'll talk to many Conservative leaders of boroughs who also want more money, because everyone does. But it is you have to look at managing your budget as well. It's two things, and when you have fewer funds, you have to make sure it goes the furthest it can be. I haven't always thought that the administration has done enough with the budget it's got. I wouldn't necessarily have spent over the last year 29 million on interims. I wouldn't have done that, and I wouldn't have spent potentially 8 million on outside legal advice where we have a legal team. It is about making sure you make the right decisions with the money you have, so it goes the furthest it can.
Yeah, I guess you can pick individual instances like that, but overall, I mean, it's not just Labour councils that are finding the pinch. I mean, you've got Nottingham, you've got Somerset, Tory-controlled councils who are feeling the pinch as well. So they're not inefficient, are they? They're suffering real cuts, or would you say these are inefficient Tory councils?
No, that's why I said at the beginning, I do believe local government has done its fair share, and I backed, you know, the LGA. There's a moving on the conversation about how more money can come into local government, and I believe that. And if you talk to, as I said, Conservative leaders, they would like more money as well. But it's making it, you have to lobby for more money, and at the same time also make sure you, with the money you do have currently, make it sure it goes as far as it can do.
I mean, in one sense, you and Labour do agree about fairer funding for Enfield, don't you? You do believe, both of you, both parties, that the funding formula is biased against or in favour of inner city London rather than the outer boroughs. And you've both been campaigning for that to be changed so outer boroughs get more funding in a fair way.
Absolutely. I've done cross-party work with the former Labour leader. It hasn't really come on since the change of administration, but I was happy to be part of that. We were both at the same event that I spoke at. We should get a bigger slice of the cake, because I think our problems have changed. We have quite a few inner London problems now that wasn't so apparent 20 years ago. And we make sure that we get the funding in line with the problems that we face. And it's about getting the right piece of the cake, as it were. And we have a lot of inner London problems now in Enfield, and we should be funded as such.
Okay. You said that you worked very closely on this with Doug Taylor, the previous leader, but nothing's happened with the previous leader. Have you not had any discussions with her about the fair funding issue?
Not yet, but obviously I'm always happy to support that.
So if she makes an approach to you, you would work together on that as you did with the previous leader?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's a fairly straight answer. So maybe we can ask her about that tomorrow, and maybe after the interview she'll be on the phone to you. I don't know though, but we'll see. But there's a sense where when you're battling for the things you want in terms of environment, in terms of care, in terms of housing, you're battling with one hand tied behind your back all the time, aren't you? Because, you know, we've seen that the spending on children in risk has been sort of slashed by a quarter in the last 5 years. We've seen rented homes have been cut by 200,000 since the Tories came to power. Welfare budgets to parents have shrunk by 37 billion in 10 years. And today we've seen headmasters march on Downing Street because funding in real terms in education per pupil has fallen by 8%. Now, with that sort of background, when you're telling councils maybe they should do things more efficiently, they're going to say, hey, but what about all this? And so you've got that hand tied behind the back and you can't really attack in the way that you want to.
It's not easy, and running a budget and a council, you do have difficult decisions to make. I'm not sure that some of what you've said. I have family relations in education, and yes, there's been a change of formula, but in some cases more money has gone in certain areas. But it is difficult, but that's why I've said when you are facing that challenge, you need to be extra concerned with the money you have. And it's not right you have to make sure everything is done correctly to make sure it goes the furthest it can do. And I don't always think that Enfield Council does as much with its money as it can do. And that then gives you scope to prioritise what you want to spend it on and to give more than you give as much as you can do. I mentioned about legal advice and things like that, but there are procurement problems that we've faced, and if you have to do them again, that's a cost, and that's a cost of frontline services in many ways. So whilst I admit it is difficult because we have had reductions, and I fully admit that, that means the money you do have has to go as far as it can in line with your priorities, so it goes the furthest.
So are you saying that really what councils should concentrate on is what they can do well within the resources that they've got, and they shouldn't use the council chamber to battle national political issues? They should look at their local area and see how they can deliver efficiently? Yes.
I think too much time is sometimes spent on council meetings on national things that we have no remit over, rather than discussing the issues of the day, reports that are decisions to do with the council. And we sometimes do not spend enough time on discussing the reports to do with Enfield Council and more time discussing national motions of which we can do little about.
I think that probably annoys quite a lot of people with their emotions about national issues. Is that a problem in Enfield that you find happens too often?
It comes across too often. We have council meetings that have lots of motions about things that are national issues, or sometimes we've had international issues, and we're councillors, we have a remit for Enfield, and we can't change defence policy. Even with the National Health Service, we don't have a full remit over that. It's delivered nationally, although we have CCGs and we talk about hospitals and things. There are certain motions that we just cannot do anything about. And as a councillor, for me, I'd rather spend time debating reports that we are deciding about our funding and services we run, rather than talking all evening about national issues which we have no remit over. Okay,
well, let's look at some of those local issues and see what your approach is on those. I mean, you mentioned housing, and housing is a real big issue because people are being now priced out of the housing market. I mean, what's your view on housing? How can we get affordable housing? What would you do differently to what the present Labour administration is hoping to do?
Well, I do support Meridian Water. It needs to happen. I sometimes complain about the management of Meridian Water, but the development of the site, I'm very much in favour of. We do need the 10,000 homes. I would be more prepared to battle City Hall over strategic industrial land. I would call it out a great deal more, because it is causing problems with the site, because strategic industrial land is by the riverfront, and that makes it difficult for selling purposes of homes, but it's also made it difficult to say, yes, we can deliver 10,000 homes because of a small anomaly that's come out of the new draft of the London plan. I would be very prepared to call it out, and I'd be very prepared, and I've spoken to London Assembly members about the problem, and I've also spoken to national government about the issue. We need to make sure that especially that corridor, the Lee Valley, becomes both an employment hub and a housing hub. If Crossrail 2 goes along that route, it should be a catalyst for using that area to be regenerated for housing. I'm supportive of that. It's very difficult to get affordable housing. I'm very lucky to have managed to get on the housing ladder in Enfield, and it's a struggle. I'm glad I've achieved it, but it took a long time, and so I do understand how difficult it is, and we've got a lot of problems in the rented sector. But we need to be able to have hard battles and make sure that that eastern corridor becomes regenerated, and that needs to be utilised fully, as well as where we've got land that potentially the council own that could be more housing.
So, you know, given the restrictions on getting affordable housing, because it's partly determined by the market as well, what can a council do? I mean, you say council should look at what they can do. What can a council do to make sure people have homes?
Well, it needs to have a strong development arm to make sure that we look like we are a council that is ready to be interested in welcome house building. I think that there is a balance to be struck between being pro house building, at the same time you can build anywhere and anyhow, because that starts the wrong sort of development. But we do have areas that could provide more housing, and they need to be utilised fully. And I know for a fact that when the Crossrail 2 consultation was going around councils, that the council committed to a large amount of extra housing along the eastern corridor, and I'd like to see that realised. It shouldn't be just Crossrail 2 that gets building down there. It should be the council potentially going to the mayor to have another housing zone, more houses in that area, but also in small pockets of where it is. But that, like I said, that should be, but I do not support proposals to develop on the Greenbelt. There doesn't need to be development on the Greenbelt, but there are areas where there could be development and should be development.
But where there is
more supply.
Yeah, but where there is development and you're building more houses, should these be houses for sale, or should they be houses for rent at a rent that people can afford?
Well, I think there always needs to be a mixture, a new community of the sizes that we need. You need a mixed and balanced community to work. And I've seen it work in other areas and it can be a success. So I think a mix between sale, then intermediate affordable housing, and for private rent. And I believe in council house building. I do believe in the council house.
Well, I see that's you being a progressive conservative. I mean, the problem in a way that the Conservatives have is that they have been living the Thatcher dream for too long, haven't they, of a house-owning democracy, and that's fallen around their feet. House ownership now is going down, the rented area is going up, and in a way, Conservatives have put their eggs all in that one basket of home ownership, and they're finding it difficult to get away from that.
I think the Secretary of State who's in charge of housing recognise that they need more of the rented sector, but I would challenge that everyone wants to rent. I think that there is a desire always to buy, to be involved in, to actually own their own home, or at least be part buy, part rent is very popular because people actually do want the chance to buy. And I know how difficult it is because I've gone through it myself, but people do want to buy. But I think there is a recognition in all levels of government, whether it's locally, regionally and nationally, that more has to be done for rental, especially in cities, because cities are where it's more expensive.
People may want to buy, but of course they can't buy because they're finding it very difficult to get on that ladder. So they are renting, and they're renting increasingly from private landlords, not from the state sector or the housing association sector, which has been suffering relatively. Now, the Mayor has been working with councils to root out rogue landlords because there's been a lot of those and a lot of stories about those recently. And he's calling on government ministers to overhaul the private rented sector, including giving renters the right to open-ended tenancies and by ending the false or revenge evictions. Now, that's what the Mayor is trying to do. Would you go along with that? Is that a policy that you would support?
I think that it's very good that we have the Mayor's done a site where you can go and have approved landlords, and that is someone that you would rent from, a house that's committed to providing a good level. And I believe that everyone has that right. Whether there needs lots and lots of extra regulation, I would like to see shown where it has worked before having that on. But the councils have enforcement powers, and they need to use them when we have rogue landlords who do not look after their side of the bargain. And we do already have that power, and it's making sure that councils do that. And I do agree with the Mayor having a website with the houses up, so people know that if your flat or the house you're going to rent is with a landlord that cares and will be very good. They've looked, I know that government and the Mayor's been looking at the tenancies. Given how people are renting longer, I think it's right that they are re-looked at, because previously, as you've said, more people have bought and it hasn't been something that's been looked at. So yes, longer tenancies to give people futures, especially with children. I think it's better that, I think that something needs to be looked at in terms of longer tenancies, and the threat to be chucked out is more to do with people not living up to their side of the bargain of the lease, or someone in the end, yes, it's their home. If they need to sell it, they will always sell it. But longer tenancies to give people some sort of commitment that they can live there for a certain amount of time is a good thing.
I mean, councils have the power to, deal with road landlords, and they can take them to court, I guess. But that power is not very used off very often, is it? You don't see many actually taken to court. You don't see many prosecuted. I mean, would you be in favour of what I think Enfield once wanted to do, and that's have a council register of private landlords who have to satisfy certain conditions to be on that list?
At the time, I wasn't in favour of that, because what happens is there's a cost involved, and that cost is then put through to the tenant. And some of these people are already being charged high rents as it is, and for something to make sure that we have the powers anyway, I'm not sure how much that would add. And there's always people who will start renting out properties that will not be on that list. And then we'd have to enforce against that as well, where we've already got the enforcement powers in place. We should be using them. And I wouldn't want to put any extra money onto the renter itself, because at the end of the day, the money just gets passed on.
Well, do you know how many have been enforced and landlords have been taken to court? Have you got any idea in Enfield of the statistics on that?
I haven't got the number, but I know that with Enfield Council, if they've been successful, I would have seen plenty of press releases on the issue, and it's not something that we see often. So
that's something you would press on the Labour Council to pursue enforcement more vigorously?
Yes. If you've got the powers and you've got a problem, we need to be using them.
Okay, well, let's go on to another topic. I mean, you talked about law and order. Some people don't refer to it that now. Conservative Party conferences always used to, I know, but people talk about community safety, gang violence, and so on. I mean, obviously, this is a big problem in Enfield in the sense that people are very concerned about it. I mean, the fear of violence is often greater than the actual violence itself, but there is quite a lot of fear and there is a lot of concern. I mean, do you think the Labour Party's got a plan for that and a strategy? And if they do, is yours different to that?
I don't necessarily think the plans for that, especially in London and Enfield, does very well with the community safety that is always provided. I agree with having council funded police officers. That was a manifesto commitment for the Conservatives to increase that number. But I believe that some of the strategies that have come out about it haven't focused enough on the problem itself. I remember when going to meetings at City Hall when Boris was in charge, and the then Deputy Mayor for Policing used to have pictures of the young people who had died up on the wall, and that was to keep people in perspective that these are young Londoners who they're people's sons or daughters in some case that have been murdered, and they need to keep that it's in mind. And I'm not sure it's as ingrained as it once was, but any work into dealing with that I would support. But a lot of it's about making sure that children and young people have activities and opportunities, so they don't necessarily take the path of gangs and violence.
But how would you do that? You're talking about early intervention in a way, aren't you? And those are the buzzwords nowadays. And the mayor has now come out. It took him a while to do it. In favour of the Glasgow model, which is a public health approach to gang violence, using a violent reduction unit, for example, to try and intervene at an early stage. I know that the community cohesion head of cabinet went to Glasgow and looked at what they were doing. I have no idea what the outcome of that was, but do you know much about the Glasgow model, the public health early intervention model? And if you do, is that something that you would favour?
I know it's something that both sides share at City Hall, going down the Glasgow model. It's not something that I have lots to do with, but I think it has to be done earlier, intervention, to stop people going into that direction itself. If you stop them earlier, then you prevent that person committing any crime, because you stop them, you give them different life opportunities. And that is true. And it's a lot to do with working with community groups and schools, because a lot of behaviour is seen in different areas of a young person's life. And I think good working with the school, relationship with the schools, is imperative in Enfield. But yes, I know that both sides in City Hall do back the Glasgow approach, so I'd be happy to. But both sides share we have to reduce serious youth violence in Enfield, and it's not something that we need to have action of. And I've been a young person in Enfield, but I had plenty of activities to do, and I had opportunities, and that's not necessarily for every young person, and we have to make sure that they know that they're there and they can be supported.
So have you discussed this in council? Has anyone come up and talked about a strategy? Has it been talked about in committee? Have you talked about the Glasgow model? Have you talked about public health leading on this? Or is this all happening in the background or not happening at all? Do you know what's going on this?
The community safety team do a lot of work with gangs, and they've got awards for it. So that's always going on in the background. I don't think the administration yet have come forward with a plan in that way. Obviously, we discuss at the crime panel what it has been doing, gangs, all the main priorities for the borough, that's discussed there. But I haven't seen a strategy come out from the cabinet member yet. There have been meetings that have taken place in the community, and I think that's the start of it. But I share the common desire that we've got to tackle serious youth violence in Enfield, and we want fewer people to choose that route in life.
Okay, I mean, in a way, it's an ideal Conservative model, because I remember Karen McCluskey, who pioneered the Glasgow model, saying it's very cost effective. It doesn't cost much, but it has great results. So more for less is something that I'm sure you would probably, support. What about if we go to sort of social and community care? How would you approach that differently to the way that the Labour administration is doing it?
I mean, that they want to do a lot more in-house, and I would look to make sure that we would necessarily provide care from the outside sector, because it is more costly, but of course that would be monitored. The care debate is very difficult because you cannot necessarily manage demand. Demand is high, and more people come in through the door that you can never really expect. So it's hard to do demand management in the way that you can do in other areas. But I think that I would do more. They've made a conscious choice, the administration, to do more themselves, and I think that's not necessarily the right thing to do. For the budget we've got, getting another care provider to provide that care would be better for the individual and better for the council financially. But care quality is always fundamental. But I think that they have made a conscious decision, the administration, to do more of it themselves. And they've created their own company, so they literally pay themselves. But I don't necessarily believe that's the most financially effective model.
But lots of care is about care in the community. It's not just about institutional care or homes. And, again, that's where the public health model comes in, where lots of people now are talking about building up social capital in the community, so the community can work together and help to, for example, tackle problems of loneliness, which is a huge problem at the moment. And I know you say that Enfield is doing everything in-house, but they do work with groups like Community Planet, don't they, in order to try and involve people on a community level on things like this.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at one section of sort of care homes, rather than, it's right to work with the voluntary sector, because sometimes we have communities that are very, very difficult to engage with. And you have people who do need help, whether it's loneliness or we need to know that they need care. And some community associations are better at engaging to hard to reach communities than Enfield Council is. And that's right to use them. And especially with loneliness, if a community group can help with that, that's an ideal place for the community groups and volunteer groups to be involved with. But they're especially good at being involved, engaging with hard to reach communities.
And do you think there is enough inter-agency collaboration at a ground level between health and local authority and the voluntary associations and families and so on? Have we cracked that now? I mean, it's been one that's been a problem for years and years under successive governments, but are we getting people to work together at a grassroots level in tackling care and providing some sort of comprehensive care to families in their own homes?
I think it's better since going to the CCG model that we have with GPs, and it's not just care as well as health in general, but it's all inter-agency working is never simple, and it could be improved. Every part of the line needs to be talking to each other, and sometimes it could be improved. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I remember making a program on that in the 1970s when people said it could be improved, and they're still saying it could be improved, and it's not been improved, and it's a real problem. Let's go. I mean, interagency collaboration is something maybe I'll take up with Nesl as well, because that's a really important thing, and we'll go into that in more detail. One of the things.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, now let's go on to one of the issues I know that you feel strongly about, and that's high street regeneration. You know, we're suffering decline in the high street in Enfield Town, Palmer's Green, Southgate, Edmonton. What do you think we can do to turn that around?
Well, we need an inward investment strategy. People got to know that, want to know that we're here, and we do have Enfield is a place to invest in terms of shops. We do have we do have people who will spend money, and sometimes that needs to be told to people. I think not enough people, we don't shout that Enfield is a great place to live enough to willing people that could come to Enfield. And I think that the council in the past haven't played a strong enough role on advertising Enfield as a place to come to in different shopping areas. Other boroughs do that, and they manage to get more people to invest. So an inward investment programme would be a priority. We need to also make sure that the high street, where there are empty shops, that we enforce on landlords who do not keep up their properties. When you walk along the high street, sometimes you see a vacant shop, and inside there's rubble or wallpaper coming off the walls and just random things left, and it's not a nice sight. So where we've got the empty shops, we do need to enforce against them if they don't, if they're not keeping them up. But we also need to make sure that we have events. We have a team we've got a director of commercial at Enfield Council that talks about events, because events bring footfall, and when they bring footfall, people spend. It's not rocket science. And where we do have events, someone said, "Oh, it's a stupid idea," but we don't necessarily have Christmas lights in the same way we do. And I think that it needs to be attractive, and part of that we need to look at where we can give rate relief. We can. It can't, and I totally get our budgetary restraints, but we have used it in previous years. We've used rate relief in Edmonton Green, and I think that we need to look at other areas for that to be used. I put forward for an empty shops task force, and there's going to be a work stream now, and that's a good thing, because I think the council can play a role in bringing people in, and that's not necessarily interfering with the market, but we need to shout out loud that Enfield is a great place to live and it's a great place to invest, and then people come.
You at the last council meeting, I think you produced 8 recommendations, and some of those were about trying to get more access to the car for the high street. In a way, how does that fit in with the idea of having friendlier streets, where lots of people now are campaigning to get rid of the car? And in Europe, in many high streets now, the car is not there, but the shops are thriving. And how does that fit in with your view that, you know, we should look at reducing our carbon footprint as well? Surely we've got to give less emphasis on cars and more on public transport.
Well, people come to our town centres by a variety of methods, but people do come by car, and we can't ignore that. And if you're going to do a full lot of shopping in one go, you're going to more likely to bring a car. If you're going to have a large shop, you're going to buy a piece of furniture, you're not going to come on the bus. So we must cater for car parking. I put down to reduce the recent increase, because we have to look at your competition around, and our competition is, looking at Enfield Town and Edmonton Green, is the ATM retail park. You can park there for free, and some of the shops are exactly the same as you can get in Enfield Town. You can go to the Brookfield Centre in Cheshunt. Again, that is free parking, and we are competing with that. And so it has to be realistic who we're competing with. And I'm afraid they provide for the car, and they provide it for free. Now, as my paper said, it's unrealistic to not charge for parking. We have to make it affordable. Therefore, people choose to spend locally, and so therefore the buses come into our shopping areas. But we have to admit that people could still come by car. And I talk to the traders in my local area, and they say on a Sunday, because we have the period of free parking, it's now the busiest day for footfall. And you can't go away from that evidence. So I think the car is here to stay for a bit, and our high streets and town centres do compete with cheaper parking, and in some sense free parking.
Okay, but you are in favour of doing everything we can to reduce our carbon footprint?
Absolutely. But that doesn't mean you put one emphasis over the other. And, you know, if you want to come by bus, come by bus. I walk but then that's because I live in the vicinity. But people do come by car, and we can't ignore that. And to keep people coming to our high streets and town centres, you have to cater for it. And at the moment, people come by car.
Well, we had one question relates to this that I'll put to you, because I know they think it's very important, and we're doing an interview with them at some time. And there is a de-invest campaign running in Enfield, which is trying to get Enfield to de-invest its funds from fossil fuels and put it in more ethical investments. I gather Enfield invests something like £60 million in fossil fuel companies. Would you be in favour of the de-invest campaign?
I would have to look at it a lot more, because I've said that we want to get the most out of the money we have. But if we can get the same level of return without having to do that, then that would be a good thing. But I'd have to look at the numbers. Okay,
well, I'm sure if you look at them, the de-invest campaign would be very interested in you doing that. Okay.
I'm happy to talk to them.
Yeah, well, I'm sure when we do the interview with them, we'll pass that on to them and tell them. Okay, so, you know, are you happy with the way that Enfield is run at the moment? I mean, do you think it's being run the right way, or do you have any criticism in the way in which the new regime is running Enfield?
I have concerns. That is true. I think I've highlighted a lot of them, and some of that is internal, like procurement and things like that need to be done correctly the first time. And we have used a lot of money where we've had to do it again, which then goes away from frontline services. And we had a problem that's going to come up this week about not being able to bury people because of change of contract, which is a bit embarrassing. So I think we need to be better there. But on governance, I think we need to be a lot stronger. And I have concerns over that, and I have highlighted them. We can't be seen to be scrutinising ourselves in a way that is, we need to make sure that if we're scrutinising decisions, that we have a fair and balanced committee that is scrutinising those decisions. And given the fact that, as you've highlighted, we do have budgetary concerns, it is absolutely imperative that our governance structure governs well.
I mean, it's quite interesting to say that you have, some concerns about the scrutiny system, because I think a lot of people will say councils where the majority party also controls the scrutiny committee raises a lot of real big problems. And there is a big move now to what people call whole community scrutiny, where civil society is involved a lot more in it, not just turning up for meetings and asking questions, but being involved in the scrutiny, having councillors come to see them, talking through with the scrutiny committee, not in the council chamber but outside, doing a lot more. Would you look at all those changes as something that you might be interested in?
I'm always interested in how we can improve the scrutiny and governance structure, because we have a large majority party, and as you say, when you have lots of people, I mean, that was the will of the electorate, that was the outcome of it, but we need to make sure that the decisions that we make are scrutinised effectively. And I have had concerns. I've always been a strong scrutineer. I challenge decisions. I've got quite a record on doing that, and I'm not afraid to call something in, which is a challenge process of decision making, if I think something hasn't been done correctly, or the method used hasn't necessarily got the furthest outcome for the council. But whether you want to look at the direct democracy or civil society, anything that makes our governance structure stronger, I do support.
Okay. How sort of proud are you of Enfield as being a multi-community, a multi-racial society with a lot of energy and a lot of diversity? And Katie asks a very nice question to you. What is Enfield's USP? I wonder what that was for a moment. I thought it was a unilateral declaration of independence, but it's a unique selling point. What do you think the unique selling point of Enfield is as well?
I said earlier, it's about the fact that we have town and country rolled into one. You can have that, and we can provide that. I think we have a diverse population, and difference makes us special, and that is just one string to Enfield's bow. But it is a great place to live, and I'm slightly biased because I said I've lived in Enfield all my life, so I have a biased nature to that. But we've got a lot to shout about. The difference makes it a special place, and difference also gives a lot of extra ideas that we wouldn't necessarily come up. But the fact that we can live in a town, and then 5 minutes or 10 minutes up the road you can be in farmlands, is a very special unique selling point that we have in North London, and we should be very proud of it. And we've got a rich history, and we've got a good future, and that is something that we can sell.
Now, I think a lot of people will agree with that. Now, one of the interesting things is that when we have this rich, diverse community, how important is it for councillors to engage with that community? I mean, some of the local government organisations in the past have said one of the three major roles of local authorities, one of them is councillors being a leader in their own community. How important is it for councillors, for cabinet heads, even for officers, in fact, but particularly for councillors, to engage with their communities, to come to meetings, to talk to people, to come on social networks like this, and to engage people openly, so everything's open and transparent, and people can make that link between the political sort of side of Enfield and the community and the diverse side of Enfield?
Well, this morning I've just done a coffee morning with some residents in Highlands Ward, and I try and do as many things as possible to engage with residents in different ways. And we can only make the right decisions if we know the issues at hand, and that is down to every councillor to engage. I've made a point of going to different communities, and I will carry on doing that. It is harder. Some communities are difficult to reach, and you can see that through consultations. You'll see in one side of the in certain areas you'll do a consultation and we'll have the responses flooding in, and it will be a similar scheme in another area and you'll only have 5 or 10, and it's because it's a lot more difficult. But it is up to councillors to engage. I try to do social media. We do the wall forums, Facebook, Instagram. We try and mix it up. It is really important because at the end of the day we represent you, and so we have a duty to engage, to know the problems in the community.
Yes, I heard a little rumour that you like social media and you like councillors to get engaged in social media. I mean, how are you trying to get your councillors to do that more often and come on, not just to like things, but to engage by, you know, putting comments on and getting involved in debate? I
think that I try and promote it, but clearly there's a lot to do with tech skills is one thing, but social media can be a very scary place for elected people. And I know that I have been trolled, and there is that side of politics that has come out. And I think it's something the Prime Minister was saying the other day, and it affects people on whatever party that has made social media negative. And that makes people more apprehensive about using social media because of things that come up. I try and do as much as possible, but what a lot of people don't necessarily know is that councillors work as well. So if you don't hear from me all the time, it's because I'm at work, and many councillors work and are a councillor at the same time, so they won't be online all the time as much as we'd love to be in order to take up issues. But it can be a scary place, and the recent nature of our politics has made it not necessarily as attractive.
Yeah, well, you know, on doing social media like this, like we're doing now, we know that if anyone swears at you, we can just ignore them, or at Nestle tomorrow, we can just ignore them. So it's quite safe here. You know, I hope it's safe here. We had a Palmer's Green Festival where Edward Smith joined 2 Labour councillors on the platform, and he said it was great. We don't usually get into this sort of a situation where we have a dialogue with each other. We're usually shouting at each other. I mean, would you encourage that? Because I know that the festival people and Speaker's Corner and Enfield Voices would love to do what we do online in real time, and to have meetings around the borough on issues. And is that something you would get your councillors to engage with, and your leads on the particular issues to engage with?
Yes, I think that some of the things that happen in the council chat, but once you leave, if you take that heat with you, I think that you probably do need a cup of tea and sit down. I prefer, we have those big arenas where we have those arguments, but when we're on committees and we're out in the community, I think it's better for everyone that we're very constructive. We will have our differences of opinion, but that doesn't mean that you should have full-scale war between the 2 sides. And we've got a duty to be out in the community and debate. And I think it's always better when you're in a sort of civilised setting, so you get the most out of all politicians. But I would agree, the more people see us, the more they can engage, and the more we know about the issues in the community.
Okay, all right. Well, we've sort of come to the end of our hour now. So how did you find your first new media interview on the internet?
It's went longer than I would expect, but it's been very good to have the opportunity. Thank you, Francis and Enfield Voices, for allowing us, and I know that Nez will feel the same way tomorrow. because it's another way for people to see us. We're not just the name on the ballot paper every 4 years. It's good that people get the chance to see us and come through with any issues and even difficult questions is what we're here to do.
Okay, well, thank you for doing it. Really appreciate it. And as Joanne said, we've got Nezel Kaliskan, the leader of Enfield Council, tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning. And so we'll be doing, I hope, an hour interview with her as well. This is being streamed on Facebook, so it will be there for you to watch afterwards. And over the weekend, I hope, if I can, I will edit it down so it goes as a YouTube video, and we'll upload them, both the interviews, to YouTube as well. So that's a great way to engage. So thank you again for Joanne for doing this. It's been fantastic, and I thought the hour actually went very quickly. So that's great. Anyhow, thank you, and we'll end this webinar now.